John Yarian is a writer, speaker, serial entrepreneur, and performance coach. He is the co-founder of Outline, an award-winning brand studio, and previously founded a strategic communications consultancy. Prior to that, he served as a press secretary on Capitol Hill and led national accounts for a Washington, D.C. public relations firm. Please welcome your speaker for the morning, John Yarian.
Thank you. I'm going to use the mic so they can pick up the audio for the recording, even though it's a little absurd, but it'll serve that purpose. It's great to be with you. It's great to be introduced by Miss South Carolina. We kind of blew past that. It's downhill from here. But it's great to be with you, and my intention this morning is to offer everyone in the audience something practical and applicable that you can actually do, like really do, later today or tomorrow, that will improve performance in some relationship of yours or your team or in some facet of your work. That's what I'm here to do. And I've told you that's what I'm here to do. So now you know how to hold me accountable for whether or not I've succeeded, which is important. And we'll come back to that later. But I really want to be clear about that goal and my willingness to do whatever is necessary to achieve it. And so we'll get underway with that in mind. I want to begin with a question that'll give us kind of an example to work with as we spend time together here this morning, and we'll pick at it off and on throughout the presentation. We're getting closer to Thanksgiving, which is exciting. It's one of my favorite holidays, and probably yours too, and for the same reason, which is the food. It's not the family, it's the food. That's what we're excited about. And so Thanksgiving is a little unique among the holidays in that there's this very important project inside the holiday called Cook All the Food. That's got to get done or Thanksgiving doesn't work. Who here has like a big Thanksgiving tradition family situation with a ton of people? Like who here thinks they have the most people for Thanksgiving? Sir, how many people are at Thanksgiving traditionally? How many? That's a high number. Can anybody top that? Is it 40? Wow. That's perfect. I'm sorry, sir. You just got blown out of the water by 40. And all these 40 people... So all these 40 people get together and they get along beautifully. Everyone just gets along. There's never a, right? No. Okay. Okay. So everybody think about Thanksgiving. Think about your family. And you think about the meal. And you can picture the faces of all the people you expect to see at Thanksgiving. There's a particular subset of that group who can go in the kitchen, do what they need to do, and present a fabulous meal relatively on time. You can think of those people and picture them in your mind. Now I want you to picture another group out of your family for Thanksgiving who, if you sent them into the kitchen, nothing would ever come out. There wouldn't be a meal. Can you picture that group, those people? So why is that the case? So we'll set aside for a second, some people can cook better than others, but the group that couldn't produce a meal, is it because maybe they've never met and are just trying to get to know each other? No, they're family. Is it because they don't share the same language? No, they probably all speak English, more or less. Is it because they couldn't figure out instructions? Like they just lack the processing power to go through it? No, it's something different. In my work, what I would refer to that group as, or how I would talk about what's going on for them, or their inability to produce a meal, is there is a deficit or lack of workability. That's the word I would use. And we use it all the time at my group as an expression of the potential or possibility of something getting done by a given group. And workability is a great term. I suggest you use it or think of something similar. One of the fun things about it is we can talk about workability without directly confronting or indicting anybody else. When we don't have a way of talking about that process of working together, we very often skip ahead to value judgments and start talking about people being lazy or not trying hard enough or something else that lights them up and creates a defensive reaction. What can be a lot more productive is to get with a group and say, hey, the level of workability in this situation is just insufficient. There's not enough happening. Nobody's cooking in here. You guys are all telling jokes. We're never going to get a meal, right? But it's not a reference to their character or personality. It's simply an expression of like, is something going to get done or not? Workability. And so what we'll talk about pretty quickly today is the three kind of key elements or principles that contribute to workability or level up workability. So as we get underway, and we'll come back to Thanksgiving in a minute, but in your own life right now, you can think about relationships that have varying levels of workability. Some of y'all have high-performing relationships with certain individuals. Lots gets done. And you can think of low-performing relationships, right, that don't produce results or outcomes. So let's not lose sight of that interpersonal element and think about the distinction, in its presence or absence. But the first, and let me pause and say, we've got some really gifted people in the room today. I'd love to hear from you. If you have a thought to contribute, there's not that many of us. Just shout it out or raise your hand. Don't let me lecture for 30 minutes. That would be not the right way to do it. The first element or principle of workability for us is intention. And you already know my intention for this session. But what I did not do is leave that up to your imagination or expectation or assumption. I articulated my intention to you. Big distinction, really significant. I've let you know why I'm up here today, and in doing so, made myself accountable to it. Think about how rarely that occurs day to day in our professional lives. How often we operate from assumption, how quick we are to assume or expect, well, we're all here. We're wearing the same monogrammed shirts. We're mostly doing the same thing. But we don't actually articulate our intention to each other for a given day, week, project, meeting, year, or anything else. And we don't notice the power of that articulation and what starts to shift when we're clear about why we are where we are. What are we doing? So one of the reasons that group of misbehaving family members can't cook a meal is because you got folks in there who are really committed. Their intention is to make everybody else laugh. That's not bad. It's pretty fun. It doesn't produce a meal. And when we get into the habit and create an institution and a culture of intentionality, it makes it a lot easier to course correct each other based on what we're seeing. Because once you've established an intention, you could also start to talk about how you would know if you achieved it and what would be its success or failure. And then you can get with somebody and say, hey, I'm dying laughing, but we declared to each other that we were going to create a Thanksgiving meal, and what you're doing doesn't seem to align with our intention. Now, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm using different language so I can access performance. And I'm having you notice that having all of us cracking up, it's not cooking a turkey. It's not getting anything done. Can anybody here relate to or have an example or ever had an experience of being at work with somebody who seemed to have a different intention than you did? Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. I would submit to you that a lack of persistent intentionality is so pervasive in most workplaces, we just gotten used to it and don't notice it. We assume people have intentions that are different from what our stated goal would be. Like, it would be weird to us if everybody showed up to work like laser focused on the work. Like, that's how far it's sunk in most environments. Like, we don't even notice it. And there's probably something coming up for folks in this room who are managers or leaders that's like, yeah, this is so frustrating. I have this team. I don't even know why they work here because they just show up. And the minute I leave the room, everything stops. And I'm starting to wonder if there's like a carbon monoxide leak. Like, what are we doing? What's going on? And there's truth to that, and it's frustrating, but what I would have you consider, or what would be more productive towards the aim, would be to ask yourself whether or not you're modeling the behavior you hope they will adopt. Are you modeling the behavior you hope they will adopt? I started out by declaring to you my intention for this session. It will be up to you if I succeed. That's a teeny bit nerve-wracking for me, because I've created the possibility of failure. But I stepped out there first. I'm already out here with an intention. That will automatically have you asking yourself, am I in this room with an intention myself? What am I here for? Have I said it out loud to anybody, or even to myself, and am I accountable to it? Or am I doing what most people do most of the time, which is I just kind of am wherever I am. I'm just here. I'm seeing how it goes. So unintentionality produces a condition I describe as seeing how it goes. And at work and in our companies and in our teams, seeing how it goes produces an unacceptable level of variance in performance. Sometimes it goes well. Great. Sometimes it doesn't. Not knowing if it will go well or not is unacceptable. And if you lead or manage people, you know this. You probably already know something about performance, which is that performance lives in predictability. We don't like that term. Sometimes we think of it as a pejorative, but predictability is what produces performance. It's me already knowing how we're going to be when we work together. And then we can focus on what we're going to get done. But in order to do that, I have to start with intentionality. Like, I have to be intentional. There's no thing up here, so I'm just going to bend over periodically. And you might be thinking, John, what's the difference between an intention and a goal? Or aren't you just talking about goals? Like, goal setting's great. We set goals all the time. I love goals. I don't want to take them away from you. Keep your goals. I would have you notice the little distinction in language and what it produces in you when we talk about it. So it's possible to have a goal and use it as a piece of Tupperware to put your idea in and set it aside. So we might have a goal of, selling X units or doing whatever else, and it would still be possible to misbehave that whole day with the idea that we'll get to our goal later. When we talk about intention, we talk about what we mean is something that drives minute-to-minute behavior, being intentional. Being, in my case, a guy who at every moment of this presentation is actively focused on my intention. That's significant, and I see a significant difference in teams when we talk about intentionality versus goal setting. They don't contradict, but I see a big difference when I challenge people to live and act with intention. Questions about intentionality? Sir?
Probably will cover this, but what is the best way to declare your intention to the team if you're saying it and you feel like the saying it isn't getting there? How do you get there?
I'm going to take a little step back from that and then get to the answer. For most of us, that process starts in the car on the way to work to really consider whether or not you have an intention. And what you will discover on many days is that you don't. So what you don't want to do is get to work, invent an intention, just say something that you imagine I want him to do, call it an intention, and then don't be a demonstration of it. So this really, guys, if you have teams, if you're a founder or leader, this starts with you. It's like, what are you doing today? What are you committed to, like you could succeed or fail? Is there anything there? If not, keep looking. Don't start talking about intention until you have one. And believe me, you'll know when you find it. You'll know. When you have it and see it in yourself, you're likely to be able to produce it with a different kind of energy than if you had invented it or had memorized it by rote. They'll notice you being that intention. So you can say it 50 different ways. The key is, like, if you really mean it, it'll land differently. And so to me, it's less about the way you phrase it. It's more about who and how you are in association with it and what they see in that meeting or that day that has them understand that we're suddenly in an intention-driven environment. And we've all had an experience of being with somebody who acts and lives intentionally. And a quick way to figure out who this is the person in your life that you don't want to be late for. Do you have anybody in your life you don't want to be late for? Do you have people you're fine being late for? Yeah. The ones you show up on time for occur for you as having intention, and you want to show up with them and meet them where they are. And you have people in your life who are pretty aimless, and it doesn't matter if you're 10 minutes late. I think I got close to it. I'm going to say more, but that's as much as I'll answer now if you'll accept that. Anything else on intention? Workability. Got to have intention. We got to be in the kitchen to make Thanksgiving dinner. And we have to say it out loud to each other to acknowledge and hold ourselves accountable to our intention. The second piece of the workability puzzle for us is integrity. Integrity. And we use integrity in a strictly engineering sense. So if you heard integrity as like ethics, like, oh, John's a man of integrity, not what I mean at all. I'm talking about integrity in the way that you assume that the seat you're sitting in is whole and sufficient to support your weight. That's structural integrity. Everyone came in here with the active assumption that these seats were integral. And the way I know that is you all just sat right down. You weren't like testing a little bit of my weight, right? Can you see the difference? So when we have and can operate from integrity, we go way faster. Think about how long it would take for all of us to get in here and get seated if none of you trusted any of the chairs. We would still be working on it. We still wouldn't have started. Teams that communicate with integrity, meaning their word is whole and complete to each other, operate at this is a stupid number, but it's HBR and it's researched. It's like a 10 to 50x differential. It's massive. The productivity gain from integral communications is massive. It's mind-blowing. We're so accustomed to unintegral communication, like you're hearing me say this and it doesn't even sound realistic. It's like, yeah, fine, okay, whatever. Like it just seems like a thing that we couldn't even get to. This idea that we would always do what we said we would do when we said we would do it. Like how foreign is that to the way your life works right now at work? It's like unheard of. That's not reality. Reality is you assign me something that's due on Friday. I get it to you like midday Tuesday. You figure out that I'm usually a little bit late, and then the next time you want something from me, you invent a deadline 2 days earlier than you actually need it, because then you hope you'll get it from me at that point. And now we're playing a game. Now we're doing 3D chess. We're doing the whole thing. And it's not productive. It's like really slow. And you've all been a part of organizations where you hire a new person and they've got to learn all the rules for all the people because nobody can actually be trusted. Well, it's like, well, did you email him or did you call him? You have to call him to get him to do something, right? That kind of stuff. This is all unintegral communication that I'm not declaring to be wrong or dishonest. So you didn't hear any value judgment over here. I'm just telling you it's slow. That's all I'm telling you. Unfortunately, when we get frustrated or when we see damage from unintegral communications, typically we leap to value judgment. Be like, you lied to me. You said I'd have it on Friday. Are you a liar? No, you don't think. Do you think of yourself as a liar? No, that's not your identity. But I've attacked your identity. And now we're doing something completely different. Like whatever it was I needed is forgotten. And now you're defensive and I'm antagonistic and we're way over here doing some sort of personal assault thing. It's really unhelpful. So we're not talking about honesty. We're talking about productivity. And a great indicator of a team that has its hands around integrity is that they say no to each other a lot. A healthy, high-performing team says no to each other a bunch. Because if you ask me for something, and I'm not certain I can do it, and I can't see a way of doing it, I won't agree to it. Think about how often you and your team say yes to each other. Yeah, sure, yeah, I got a handle. Yeah, well, I'll figure it out. And you know it. You have assigned something to somebody who's agreed to do it, and by virtue of the way they agreed to it, you already knew they didn't know how to do it. Like, you've had that experience. And you're like, okay, well, we'll just see what happens. It's usually not very good. And it comes back to this predictability part. Managers and leaders, who likes getting surprised? Who likes finding out on Friday you're not going to get it by Friday? Yeah, it just doesn't work very well. But we have to be with teams in a way that have them form a relationship to integrity that is divorced or separate from morality or character judgment. We got to get them in on it as a productivity hack. And that way we can create language around it that isn't combative or defensive. It's productive. But the only way we're going to get there is if we move it and demonstrate it ourselves. Now, I assume everyone here, all of these leaders in this room, operate with perfectly integral communications. Is that right? We have one. We have one perfectly integral person. Others can see there maybe is a little integrity deficit. Can you see that in yourself? Yeah. Some of us are the people that other people know they can be late for. Doesn't make you a bad person. Just not driving performance in the relationship. When I am late, when I am unintegral, I am always teaching the other person or group that they too can be late or unintegral. We are co-creating. My relationship to you is defined in part by who and how I am with you that has you notice or discover how to be with me. Now, as a manager, what I would prefer to do is blame you. It's his fault. He's jealous of me and underqualified. That feels amazing. That's not very productive. And it puts all the accountability for the relationship on him. And so if you're sitting here and getting slightly uncomfortable, because it's like, well, okay, John's kind of blaming me for my team's performance. Yeah, there's some accountability there. Yeah, that's where the work is going to be. If we are not operating with integral communications, we're not going to get integrity back. We're going to get whatever the other thing is. And I don't have that like it's wrong or bad. I'm just telling you it's like highly unproductive. In the same way with these seats example, like all the chairs work. And if one of them was broken, we'd put a sign on it that says broken. Boom, everybody sits down. So I could go on and on and on about integrity, but what you've heard me say is we use it in a strictly engineering sense. It's easy to make examples, and it gives us access to have communications around it with team members in ways that aren't hostile or judgmental. Integrity. Anybody have a question or comment about integrity? Yeah. So we have an example of a client relationship. The client was blaming a previous relationship or partner for being unintegral, and what you discovered is they themselves just cannot be counted on. Yeah, I love that. That's so easy to relate to. And it has me turn to the consequences of unintegral relationships. What happens when somebody is consistently unintegral with me or cannot be counted on? That client relationship's not going to work for very long. Okay, it doesn't work. Every single thing you've signed up for because you wanted the money or it seemed to make sense or be great for a reputation, and you ended up in a relationship that you couldn't count on, you have always regretted it. It's never been worth it. It never actually works out. There has to be a period of time where we operate and demonstrate integrity, and if we don't receive it, we have to show our team and ourselves that we're worthy of a life of integrity. We're not going to get ignored by a client because they're good about paying their retainer and teach everyone that integrity is optional, and if the money's good enough, it's fine if we just can't count on each other. Sir?
How would you give us an example of like how you kind of calculate when you're operating or your team's operating outside those norms, and what do you do to kind of get back on track and make sure that you're still operating?
Yeah, so the first piece is you just talk about it more, and we'll get to how to do that in just a minute, but you first, again, as the leader, get real clear, am I operating in integrity? Anywhere I'm out of integrity, I got to clean it up. I have to acknowledge and clean it up and get back into integral communications. I need to let people know what I expect from them in return, and then have them notice it when I notice they aren't doing it, which is not the same as me chasing people around with a stick. It's not that. Again, it's not a moral judgment. It's not an accusation. It's me having you said you'd do it by Friday. You didn't do it by Friday. And there's a real world outcome from that. It's not about my feelings. It's like now the client doesn't have it. And now we can't be counted on. And go through the process, right? What I've noticed is if you tighten up as a leader your relationship to intention and integrity, it gets really hard to be out of integrity with you. Because you have people in your life that are like that. And you know what it's like to be around them. It's like, I'm not going to screw up around him. That's performance in the relationship coming from a demonstration and not like a punishment. Sir?
I assume this is best done one-on-one and not in a group.
Well, you could. You could create that because, you got to think of it like a football team that runs plays and has assignments. It doesn't have anything to do with you. It's like we need a certain kind of performance out of the quarterback position for the team to succeed. When I move the language out of value judgment, everybody's shoulders can come down. I never called anybody a liar. We're in a meeting about productivity. Now, that meeting is going to be tough to have if I'm not being a demonstration of the concepts I'm talking about. It is not going to go well. If I'm being a demonstration of these concepts, it's going to go fine. Because what my team is going to experience is a guy who's totally committed to getting something done, which is different than looking good in front of his team or throwing my weight around or whatever else, right? If I can get myself out of the way, have them experience me as committed to an outcome, it's fine. They're not going to be offended. I'm just trying to win. But I got to change the language and change the experience of it for them.